back to this week's episode of Green Enterprise, a partnership between my company, Digital Venture Partners, and Black Enterprise Magazine, where every week I have a conversation with a prominent Black cannabis executive that I think is making positive progress for themselves, but more importantly, creating an infrastructure for more Black people to come into the space and replicate what they've done. This week I have with me Brandon Barksdale, the CEO of Dalwhinnie Farms, based out of Colorado. How you doing today, my brother?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. Me and you have had a few conversations. I'm honored to finally have this interview on this platform, but I would love for you to give our viewers an idea of your professional background before you hopped into the cannabis space. And the second part of that question was, what was that moment where you identified the cannabis industry as a realistic opportunity for you?
Yeah. So my background's super traditional and untraditional at the same time. I mean, I studied at the University of Virginia, graduated, stepped into the financial industry, and from there jumped into consulting across a wide variety of different industries, and ended up becoming displaced to the East Coast and moved west to San Francisco, and stepped into the startup world for a little bit, and ended up coming back into consulting. And so, when I was in professional services, we touched every industry from financial services to consumer goods and products, retail, and manufacturing. And there's actually a lot of synergies actually between those industries and the cannabis industry. It wasn't until a little bit later in my professional services career where I was tasked with driving our CFO advisory practice as it relates to being an industry leader within cannabis. And so as I slowly stepped into more complex operations and to a variety of different industries, it really became a central focus of my career. And so slowly but surely, I took the lead in our cannabis industry group from an advisory perspective. And slowly but surely, it snowballed into a career where I was kind of tasked at and was kind of the subject matter expert as it relates to the cannabis knowledge within our firm. And so, that firm was a top 10 accounting firm. And so, our advisory practice was very strong there. And so it was a pretty seamless kind of transition in the sense that I had been doing, cannabis industry work, in a consulting type environment, and then decided to hop over the fence into the industry full time.
Okay. And something interesting about what you said that's kind of like a running joke in cannabis is like one cannabis year is 4 years in another industry, just based off how quickly it moves. Was there an adjustment in maybe like the speed or like the demand once you came into cannabis full time, or was it very similar to what you were doing already?
It's a fast-paced industry. Absolutely. And so, I like to think that, consulting and professional services can also be just as fast-paced depending on the demand of your clients. And being that I had jumped into cannabis, I mean, we were going 100 miles per hour anyway. And so definitely when I stepped in, it was one of those feelings where it was like, oh yeah, everything that they say is true. This is definitely the wild, wild west. But truthfully, that's really where the opportunity presents itself, right? In the sense that you're able to jump in, create stability, jump in and be able to establish controls, really establish a current state analysis of the operation that you're actually involved in, and then create the marching plan towards how you want to create more stability within your organization as well.
Okay. And so your current company, Dalwhinnie, can you give us an overview of the company, 10,000 foot, and then also how you came into your current role as CEO and kind of what that looks like for you?
Yeah, so Dalwhinnie Enterprises is a vertically integrated cannabis company out of Colorado. We have grow operations outside of Telluride in an area called Ridgeway. And we have a dispensary up in the mountains in Aspen, Colorado. And we also have a manufacturing arm in Denver, or right outside of Denver in Commerce City. And so, we have a hemp company as well, Ridgeway Hemp Company. And so when you look at all these different, operationals, they're all businesses that could stand alone on their own right. And so, our company is really is really pronounced on bringing wellness to our end customer. And so we pride ourselves on having the best grow practices that we possibly can, the most sustainable grow practices that we possibly can, and look to bring organic practices into what it is that we do, right? And so because there isn't like a clean cut certification, right, on organic cannabis growth, practices or certifications as such, you have to really instill that that worth and that stock in your own organization. And so we take pride in that, in the sense that we bring those organic practices in, and that's how we actually cultivate. That's how we actually create our SOPs and all the way through production. And it's about bringing the cleanest product to market that we possibly can. And so that's really what wraps around our company's operations and our mission and objective. And tied within that is it's fun, right? Like we are in the cannabis industry, so it's meant to be fun. It's meant to bring a center of wellness, and for our consumers that are trying cannabis for the first time, or for the connoisseurs that are out there in the market, where they look to this product for wellness, for lifestyle, for all the benefits that it brings.
Okay, and the thing that struck me about you once I came across you and your story was you're a CEO in Colorado, which I don't want that to be lost upon our viewers, because I've been in the space for about 4 years, been doing this series for almost 2, and you were only the second Black CEO that I've met of a cannabis company in Colorado, the first being Wanda James, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Colorado, even though it was and still is an industry leader in, developing a market, right, and normalizing cannabis in the state, there isn't very much Black leadership within these companies, right? So what does that look like for you to have to operate and prove, I don't want to say prove out, because it's well proven that Black people can exist in our positions, right? But how does it feel to be aware of the fact that there aren't enough Black leaders, and you, as one of the few, are leading the charge on that front in a state like Colorado?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. I think that as it relates to the cannabis industry, right, just staying in that lane, I think that the industry at large is trying to figure out how to create more diversity across the playing field. And so, in Denver, there's different statutes around social like social equities and social charges that task people, if you are applying for a new license, that has to be tied to some type of broader benefit for people who have had challenges with cannabis in their background and other components. And I know that there's other markets that do similar type of statutes to create an entry point. And I think that, as awesome as that is it's also not enough, right? And so I think being able to task and carry some of that burden, myself across the industry as well, I think that that's really where the opportunity lies, right? And people just taking charge of creating the avenues themselves, relying on the states and municipalities to assist, but also for your organization to carry a weight of that as well. And so, that's really where my mind wraps around it, and knowing that, there's definitely movement. It still has a long way to go. That's for sure.
Okay, and kind of touching on something that you spoke about earlier, which was you coming into the space and then you having you were fortunate enough to have an understanding about cannabis because you worked for a firm and you took a lead on a cannabis partner. What advice do you give for the entrepreneur who's coming into the space, who may not have any experience, or not even just a professional, not even an entrepreneur, but a professional who's like, I want to come into the cannabis space. They don't really know the first thing yet. What advice do you give to that person? Because I'm sure you get tasked with that question often.
Yeah, I mean, and so from a professional services perspective, I was tasked with leading a specific industry practice area, right? And so that practice area was, finance, business transformation within the cannabis industry. And so, business transformation is generally like end to end. So, all operations. And then with it being tied into my specialty, which was also finance and accounting, it gave me a pretty broad lens, right? Everyone doesn't have that same opportunity. And so, but I do think that, generally speaking, if you are interested in something, there's so much education out there. And I know that sounds, pretty cookie cutter, but, truthfully there is. I mean, when there's something that has changed in the industry or any type of statutes that come down where, even myself might not be as familiar, like I have to go find out, right? I have to go learn and educate myself. And so that self-education, I think, is step one. And as you become more and more knowledgeable, this is a very new industry. People don't ignore that, right? And so, the people who are experts, in the newest markets have been doing this for, a handful of years, right? And so, you think about your more mature markets, they might have more maturity around the operations that they've had to deal with, state compliance, federal compliance, et cetera. But, truthfully, it's definitely a open playing field. And so the person who puts the most effort and self-education, the most networking, and really trying to apply your skill set to really understand the market is going to be the person that comes out on top. And so definitely worth someone is looking into this industry to do your research. Try to take that research and tie it to where you do have experience, right? Package that together and go try to, get more hands-on experience in different professional settings within the cannabis industry to try to elevate that into a more fruitful career in the cannabis industry.
And one thing that I want to ask you specifically, which you give me great faith that the space is going to be in good hands, because normally when I talk to a CEO, they are either a salesperson or a marketer, right? It's like, this is a brand new industry, it's growing. We want our company to multiply. So sell the hell out of it, market the hell out of it, right? Those are normally the people who occupy the CEO spaces. I'm sure you would agree in cannabis, right? So as a finance guy, how are you approaching it maybe a little bit differently than the traditional CEO that we kind of see in the cannabis space today?
Yeah, so anyone that's been following the industry knows that there's a ton of unknowns out there, right? There's a ton of information that is trickling down. You really can't plan for, right? The volatility, the multiple markets and economies coming online, like all that has impact to the locale in which you exist and which you operate. And then the overarching, kind of unknown is, of course, like federal legalization and what does that mean? And so, when you're trying to plan, what's the future for your specific brand or your specific operations, people are tying it into a couple of strategies. It's like, all right, well, am I a boutique kind of craft cannabis brand, right? And do I just need to be expanding my brand as best possible and tying into different components, lifestyle, influencers, whatever, to expand that as fast as I can? Is there more of a multi-state operational plan where we want to be cultivating, manufacturing in multiple states across the country or across the world? There's the retail strategy, right? And really trying to explain your retail footprint and then work your way backwards to the supply front. And, and all of those are right. People need to be working in different directions for an industry that's coming online to be successful, right? And so I think, that's kind of like the free market, the economies of scale that are working together to really create a competitive landscape. And so, for us, it's really about operational excellence. I mean, it's about bringing consistent product to market every single time, right? to bring consistent experiences to market every single time, right? We want our customers that leave our dispensaries to feel like, they had the most educational and unique experience that they've ever had when they step into a dispensary, right? When they smoke our product, like, or ingest our product, whatever their specific kind of, intake method is. It's about, did you have the best experience, right? And is it consistent with what you remember from last time? And are we keeping you engaged with new products that we're bringing to market? And so that education and really allowing people to create a baseline or a status quo of what to expect from different cannabis brands out there in the marketplace is what we're really trying to set, right? There needs to be some accountability from the consumer, right, on what to expect when you're actually engaging with a variety of different cannabis brands. When you open a bag of Doritos or Cheetos, right, you know what to expect when you open that bag, right? And if you get something different, your expectations are going to be off. And so our biggest thing is like trying to really tie into, when you open that bottle of Cabernet, you're getting Cabernet, right? And how do you tie that in, all the way back into your operations, right? And so that's the operational excellence that we're moving towards, that we're trying to be trendsetters on, and forward-thinking leaders, and establishing, that status quo of what the consumer can expect.
Great. And I have one final question, obviously, in closing, which is, what can we expect from your company in 2022? But before I ask you that, I want to ask you, what are some of the misconceptions that people have for a cannabis CEO? Because I'm sure what you do day to day versus when you tell people outside of the space what you do as a cannabis CEO, probably night and day. So like, what has been like the reality of running a cannabis company that an outsider who's not doing what you're doing may not know just yet?
It's a good question. I mean, I think it's definitely a roll up your sleeves, activity. It's not a sit behind the desk and you're pointing in one direction, things just go in that direction. It's definitely you're literally in the weeds, no pun intended, of everything that's going on, every corporate function, every operational area, and it needs your oversight. It needs your attention to detail. And, it's really, again, just a hands-on industry. And that goes for every role that actually, is embodied by an individual or talent that is brought on board of a cannabis company. And so I think that's probably the biggest misconception, is that, you're just hanging out and just
throwing weed parties,
smoking, chilling. And it's definitely more than that, right? Like, I mean, again, I look at my day, and it's as much, 10,000 foot activities are going on. There's also, on the ground, feet to pavement activities that are happening simultaneously. And you have to figure out a way to juggle both. And so I think that's probably the biggest misconception that there is out there, is that, there's definitely a roll up your sleeves, hands-on activity that's happening at every moment of every day, and you're a part of it.
Right. And I tell people, I agree 100,000%. I also say that like the industry is in its infancy, right? So it's like, no matter where your company is, whether you're a startup or you've found really great footing in cannabis, the industry itself that you operate under is ever changing. New legislation. We have no idea what's happening month to month. So even when you may be in good standing for your company, something may happen in your municipality that changes everything. So I tell people that it's like a constant adjustment that you have to make as a leader in the space. And you have to be okay with the fact that you don't really have control over anything right now,
Not only that, I mean, the base of the industry is horticulture, right? And so, there's surprises that pop up in horticulture all the time. It's farming at the end of the day. And so, you're managing and mitigating 24/7. So you tie that with the challenges of the compliance from, state municipalities, federal, et cetera. It's, yes, you're always juggling. And no, a lot of times it is very cloudy. in terms of the direction you're headed. And then as you have other states coming online around you, it also impacts your operations and what happens. And so, definitely a ton, to juggle, balance, and try to understand and make the best decisions for, your organization and for the market, as those things materialize. So it's definitely a good call out.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you so much, Brandon. It's a true honor. I can honestly say you're one of the brightest people I've had a conversation with thus far. So I'm very confident in the success that you have found and you will continue to find in the space. I would love for you to give our viewers an idea of where they can follow you, particularly if they have any questions, and also your company for upcoming achievements.
Yeah. So you could follow us on social media. So our handles are Dalwhinnie Farms. And that's Instagram. Shift Cannabis, that's Instagram as well. I'm just Barksdale, Just Barksdale. You can always reach out if you have any questions. I'm more than happy to respond and answer. LinkedIn, you can find me as well. But this is definitely a pleasure. We're looking forward to 2022. And again, I mean, the biggest thing I think that we try to definitely just compare ourselves to, like, more or less of a fine wine. Like, we grow in the most beautiful part of Colorado. Our dispensary reflects where we grow. And it's just one of those things where, you want to know all the time what you're getting, right, in your end product. And so, we put a lot of care in our craft, to make sure that happens on the sustainability front and on the organics front. So, we're really just trying to lead the charge and creating that level set across the industry. So
thank you so much for your time, sir.
awesome, man. Thank you.